All right, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to one of the vBrownBag Tech Talks. I'm going to talk about PowerCLI administration with a Windows Docker image. This is probably not what you guys are used to, but for me, this is what's worked in my environment, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience and some stuff looking forward. I'm the CIO of Blade Technologies. We're a software development company out in Baltimore, Maryland. So let's get started. Don't buy anything because of what I say today. That's pretty much what this guy's for. So, all right, so I'm going to describe a little problem to you. I would imagine that you guys probably experience this yourself in your environments. And essentially it's, you know, from a production standpoint, think of the system administration. How do I create an environment to run your script and then share that same environment with all of your other team members, right? I work on a team of 11 people, and it's difficult sometimes to say, all right, well, go run this script, right? And they run it, and all of a sudden you see all the red stuff coming down the PowerCLI window, right? It's, you know, and I'm like, well, did you install this module? Did you install this module? And they're like, what do you mean, right? So we can certainly have a profile script that can take care of that, but it doesn't mean that, you know, if you have a non-PowerShell item that you're going to test whether or not a plugin or a DLL is still on the box. Right? So, you know, there's a couple ways to solve it, right? You can have a template virtual machine, right? You can, you know, clone that machine for every team member you have, right? But then you got to keep that up to date. So that can be a pain in the butt. You got to patch them, right? Because they're part of your infrastructure. You don't want them to be outdated and be vulnerable to, you know, security threats, because these are the machines you're managing your vSphere environment with, right? So you got to make sure that they're patched. And again, you know, same configuration drift, right? Whether it's your desktop, whether it's a virtual machine, you got to make sure that everything stays in sync, especially if you're, you know, globally managing systems. And then, you know, when you're executing work or executing a task that might be patching a VM or rebooting the VM, it can't be part of your infrastructure, because then it's going to, you know, be rebooting while your script is running, right? What happens in that scenario, right? So you're always going to have that excluded from whatever script you're running, right? And that gets to be a pain when you're trying to, you know, have that management trail of, you know, what you're doing in your environment. Local desktops, you know, it's the virtual machine, but even more complex, right? You're going to take a machine from under your desk and like ship it to Tokyo. I don't know what the cost is of that, like on a monthly basis, because you install a patch. So that can be, you know, very costly. It's a pain in the butt. You really need to get to like a thin client deployment anyway, right? Everybody's moving to a smaller footprint, reproducible. You can easily redeploy desktops to whatever your cloud provider is. All right. So, you know, going back and looking at the VM process and the desktop process, right? We create a standard image. We determine our software stack, whatever those items might be. And then we download your baseline scripts, install all your modules, and then we're going to clone that VM, or we're going to, you know, use Windows imaging tools and push that out to your hardware. And for, you know, every time we break something, we're going to have to go through that deployment process again for whoever your team members are. It's quite cumbersome, so you know, I had to get away from that. It was taking way too much of my time just to make sure that the person next to me could run the same exact script that I run. All right, so the solution, if you couldn't tell, it's going to be inserting Docker. So 3 simple commands, right? Push, pull, run. Pretty simple. You know, as we go through, we'll kind of talk about each one of these. It's, you know, I don't know how many of you are system administrators, but it's definitely a change. So I have an image out there called Power Tools. It has PowerCLI, and I'll just read them off. PowerCLI, PowerVRA, PowerVRO, Pester, Vester, PowerAmp, Lumber. I watched a presentation yesterday with Ariel Sanchez, and he was doing a vDocumentation module. So yesterday, right after his presentation, I went ahead and added that to the Docker image as well. So that'll be included if you pull that down. But it's pretty simple. You start with a Docker file. The Docker file describes the environment that you want. So you can install modules, you can install MSIs, EXEs. You know, the only thing I'll caution you on is that there is a difference between Windows Server Core and Windows Server Nano. So there's a really tiny version and a larger version. Executables and MSIs work differently on the two of those. So, you know, be careful as you start building your Docker images, because you might get a lot of errors. Once you build it and you get a successful run, I always kind of run the image locally before I tag it and then push it out to Docker Hub. But the commands are pretty simple. This is all through PowerShell, so you're going to do a docker build -t, the name of the image you want to create, and the dot simply says that there's a Docker file in the directory that I'm executing the command from. And then once it builds, Windows, I'm not going to lie, they're large images. It takes a little while to build, but you'll get used to it. It's no different than trying to redeploy a VM. And then once it's built and you're happy with it, you can tag it, and the next thing is you just push it up to the Docker Hub, or if you have a local registry. I would imagine most people probably do not have a local Windows Docker registry. But essentially the push is just an upload. So this is essentially using Git behind the scenes. So if you guys are using Git to manage your scripts within your environment, it's essentially the same commands, just using the Docker language. All right. So once you've pushed that and you've tagged it with, I'll go back a second. So you can see here that I'm pushing it with latest. So the very end after the colon is going to be the version. Right, so what I'm basically saying is upload this as the latest version, and that way when the rest of my team needs the latest version, they're just going to do docker pull JP-side or power tools. It's going to pull it straight down for them. It's going to be the latest version. It'll have all the latest modules. Additionally, when you do the build and you're connected to the internet, you will also get the latest Microsoft container or the Microsoft image, which means you're already getting the patches. Right, so if you want to get onto a monthly cycle of building out your Docker images, those patches will be included in that. So that's kind of a nice feature as long as Microsoft continues with their patching cycle, and you're not installing the patch, which saves you time, right? Let's see. So again, pooling is downloading, so you're going to pull it down to your box. Again, at this point, the only requirement for the rest of the team is to have Docker installed and running. If you go out to my blog, I have a pretty good instruction set on how to get Docker installed, what it requires, how many reboots it takes, and then how to switch from Linux to Windows containers. Currently, you cannot run both on a Windows machine at the same time. You have to switch the kernel between the two. So it kind of stinks. Soon, basically, we're going to do some isolation to where you can run both in the same Hyper-V session, essentially. All right, next thing, running a container. Again, pretty simple. Docker run -i, I's for interactive. You can also have it run in the background, right? So I think, if you want to create a container and start executing commands, you're going to want the -i. You also have the, it's no different than running a job in the background of a PowerShell console if you don't run with the I. So it'll go out and run a script in the container, and when the container is finished running the script, the container goes away. So I'll talk about that more in a minute. But again, the run is really just executing this in your runtime environment, right? And that's what we're trying to get to is a common, consistent runtime environment for you and your team to run scripts across your enterprise, right? Without having to worry about any kind of outside factors that will either influence your script or cause you to have to basically rerun it, right? Because that could be problematic if you start cloning a machine, right, and then your script breaks. Well, now you got to figure out, and how do you clean that up, right? How do you restart halfway through a script, depending upon what that script's doing? All right, so I've talked about all the benefits. It's not perfect, right? So the pros and cons, right? Generally, containers, and I say this loosely, are small and lightweight. I would say that is not necessarily true with Windows containers. It's new and exciting, right? Everybody's doing it. I mean, I don't know how many sessions you've been to, but everybody's talking about containers. Not a lot about Windows containers, but everybody's moving their applications to containers to make things easier to update, easier to push out, faster deployments. And I personally believe that we as system administrators should be doing the same. You'll get the taste of exactly what your developers are going through, which means that as you experience how to implement this process, you're going to understand what they're going to feel as they implement their process for their software, right? That you're ultimately supporting anyway. So you're going to be able to improve your process, improve their process, and your organization as a whole will continue to grow and create better work. You might actually like this. So I encourage you to go out and try something new. And again, the clean state of the environment, the runtime environment, is really what we're after. All right, I am running out of a lot of time, so I'm going to speed up. All right, yeah, customizable. So you can customize it for your organization, you can customize it for your environment. All right, we'll go to the other side, the cons. It's another thing to manage, right? So you're shifting your paradigm. So you've solved one problem, but now you've created another problem, right? You got to make sure the Docker engine's updated. You got to make sure your containers are updated or your images are updated. You still need a host OS, right? This isn't something you can just deploy. vSphere integrated containers does not support Windows yet. So you're still, wherever you want to run these, you are still required to have a host OS. And customizable, you're going to ask, where do I even begin? How do I create this thing? And, how do I get scripts onto it? So there's a learning process. Let's see. Windows containers are huge. I think when I end up building the PowerTools VM, it's about 9 gigs. So it's large, and it's changed, right? So you got to be aware of that. And it doesn't really feel normal, right? You feel like a developer. It kind of takes you away from the system administration again. All right, so read the manual and read the manual again, because everything's in there. It just may not make sense the first time. Where I went wrong is I started creating basically very large images. So every time that you have a line in your Docker file, that's creating a layer, right? And that layer adds up. So try to string a lot of your stuff together. Abby Fuller does a great job of this. I went out to DockerCon this year. Check that out. All these slides will be posted. Let's see. Kevin Kirkpatrick, he has a very similar image out there. I stole a lot of stuff from him. He's great. Look him up. Pull his image. And the main reason why I'm doing Windows is because I'm a Windows guy. And then a lot of my applications that I'm running in PowerShell require things that the Linux version does not have. So, and that's mainly like a MySQL plugin. So there is a fling out there for PowerCLI Core with on the Linux version. So I encourage you to download that and give that a shot. I'm going to skip that, but essentially, you want to put one of these in each of your environments. So thank you guys. I have a couple presentations coming up. I want to thank the guys in the back for setting this all up and getting us out here. And thank you all.